Hey guys, it's Mike with another GodForge video. Today we're actually going to talk about a potential pitfall that GodForge might run into, and I think was a big problem with King Arthur, and kind of go back and forth about some of the things that have made Raid successful for 6 years, whereas I feel like the player base of King Arthur is dwindling rapidly. But I do think there's a specific thing that could potentially be an issue when trying to launch a game and trying to make it as big as possible all at once. So let's go ahead and get into it. So I know the first thing you think I'm going to say is we need champions in the game. Obviously with King Arthur that's a struggle. We have less than 75 champions in the game or something silly like that. That's not a pitfall I think GodForge is going to run into. They've already announced that I think they're expecting over 200 champions at launch, and they're going to be bringing more and more champions into the game. So that's not a concern that I have for GodForge. I think that's going to be pretty healthy and work out really well. One thing that I think could potentially be a concern is trying to do too much all at once. And I think about the success of Raid over 6 years and why it has worked so well is the incremental gains that you get. It kind of slows you down as a player as far as how fast you can do things. So you think about like how fast you can actually max out a character by building up the food to feed them and getting them to 6 stars. This is not something you can do in a day unless you've been stockpiling resources. Your first one takes you a very long time, probably too long to be honest. Probably takes you a good, first week or two in the game to get that first 6-star character, and then once you get to a point where you're farming, you can do that a little bit faster. But it's a grueling process to level each and every character up to 6 stars. Later on, you start stockpiling resources, and then you can do it a little quicker. But even still, like getting all the experience necessary to get them up to 60, the resources to ascend them, and then now the resources to awaken them. All that is a process that takes time. The other thing too is they added these steps to character development over time. So for example, if Raid would have started with the awakening process right out of the gate, it probably would have felt a little more complicated for new players. It also would have been, people would have 6-star awakened characters a lot earlier. So by kind of kicking that can down the road and bringing those elements in over time, I think that's a healthier way for the longevity of the game, because you get the in-game whale accounts that are going to max their characters out, and right before they start getting bored with the game, which is a pretty delicate balance, you introduce a new carrot, a new thing for them to work on to better their account. And I think that is a winning strategy over time versus just launching everything you can possibly think of all at one time to put the best game forward. I would almost feel like if you sandbagged, 20% of the ideas you want to bring into the game, and so at any particular moment you have them ready to go in your arsenal. That way, when you started getting feedback from those folks that are spending lots of money on the game where maybe they're petering out, you have those things to instantly push out there to keep that player base satisfied and coming back and spending money. Because I think that we're learning that the development of all the aspects of the game just takes longer than we anticipate. We were hoping that the beta launch was going to be in March. And no shade. I mean, obviously this is a huge undertaking for this team. So it's a process. But now we're pushed back to May, and then now we're looking at probably late June, early July. And that's totally okay. At the end of the day, we want the best product forward that we can to give the best feedback that we can. So with that beta launch, we're going to have a lot of things to kind of work through. But I do think if we kind of keep a couple of those things in your back pocket, where you're potentially saving some kind of upgrades for champions or gear or whatever the case is, that could be a big win. Also, same idea with the gear. When you go in and you look at pieces of gear here, you can now, I forget what they call it, but you can ascend your gear. You can level up. If you come into upgrade, you can rework, you can ascend it, yeah. So you can get in here, and then you can do fluids on your artifacts. So there's different ways of upgrading these guys in the game that have not been in the game the entire time. So they've been, I think they came out a few years back, but it's a way of basically taking stuff that you've earned in the game, stuff that you have built up, and then making it better and better over time. And again, I think that's a winning strategy versus just launching everything all at once, as well as taking, say they came out with 7-star gear, where now you kind of feel as a player that feels really bad because you're like, oh, I have all this 6-star gear that I've been farming for a long time, and now it's all useless and I have to replace all of it. And I finally got lucky with an amazing roll. This isn't a good example, but like a 4-time speed roll on one of these pieces of gear, and now I'm going to go ahead and trash that gear and go ahead and move on. And I think with the mythical launch of gear that kind of happened, and then there was some other thing, I'm trying to remember what it was, where it would upgrade your main stat plus additional, and then over time, I think it was with the fluids actually. It started to kind of be like, well, I had this amazing piece of gear that became mediocre as I upgraded it with fluids because I needed it to get lucky again and again and again. And I think that kind of puts a bad taste in players' mouths as opposed to just taking the stuff you have and making it better. If we come out to the marketplace here, the Guardian Ring wasn't part of the game initially. The Forge, the Ascension, what is that? Ascension, so of Altar Souls, all got added to the game over time and made the game, I think, in some ways better, and in some ways, the Altar of Souls kind of lost me. I think once you start awakening champions, it was like, oh man, you got RNG on top of RNG on top of RNG is just a little bit brutal, especially for the rate drops and the generosity of raid. But anyway, I digress. These things came in over time and weren't all in the game right away, and so it kind of allowed for you to learn a easier version of the game. I can't imagine trying to start the game right now. Like, I feel like it would be incredibly overwhelming with everything going on and just the complexity of it, as well as just how fast champions are moving. I don't know. I mean, it probably is a great experience. I haven't done it since the beginning of the year, and I made it, I don't even know, 2 weeks, 3 weeks in, and I was out. But that being said, I think that bringing those things in over time as those whales start to approach those finish lines keeps that carrot moving forward, keeps them engaged with your game, and having some of these things ready to go at launch, but not putting them in game is going to kind of allow you that first 6 months to a year to have some pretty big content drops that are going to be crucial for the health of the game, just in case you run into some sort of snag or something takes a little longer than you were hoping. You have some pieces in your arsenal to drop on the game. Like, again, going into the clan boss, you've got 3 different clan bosses now. When you first started, there was just the one. And again, I think that inevitably you're going to grow your game over time, but I think if you start out trying to compete with Raid at where it's at right now, it is going to be a detriment to the game, not a benefit. I think that if you kind of keep it a little simpler at first and then kind of try to think like every 2 to 3 months we're launching something big, I think that will be a much healthier way to grow the game than it would be to put everything in the game all at once at launch. Now, I know obviously when they put everything in the game, that's not the end all be all. They're going to be working on new things and getting things better and all of that. But I do feel like keeping things a little on the simpler side could be a huge benefit. And then the last thing I'd talk about that I think will make or break the game would be actually drop rates. And I think that King Arthur's running into this. I do feel like there is a lot of room between Raid and King Arthur, for sure. I think that summoning characters in the game is one of the most exciting parts of the game. And so you want your player to be able to do that fairly frequently. So I do think they need to be more generous with the amount of shards or opening stones. I forget what they're calling them. But as far as that goes, being more generous than Raid with that, so you get to open characters more frequently. You get to do more pulls, because that is a very fun aspect of the game. But if you double that up with amazing drop rates, you're going to run into a problem similar to King Arthur, where you basically just end up with every character in the game, and then you get kind of stagnant and stale and bored, and it's less exciting when you pull a great character, because you kind of have this inevitability where you're like, I know eventually I'll get the character. Whereas in Raid, when you pull a great character, I mean, you're really excited because the odds of you getting that character are insane. And then, I mean, now you got to pull them 5 times, and then you got to go get their 6-star awakening. So you got to get lucky 6 times to get a character maxed out, which is kind of crazy. But at the end of the day, you are super excited because of those drop rates. So for me, what you got going on up in here as far as drop rates may not be super off the mark. I think voids are definitely off the mark. For anything similar to voids in GodForge, these guys should definitely be better than an Ancient Shard. They're at least 3 to 5 times as hard to get in the game. So the fact they have the same drop rates is asinine. They should be at least twice as good. I would argue probably 3 to 5 times as good because they're 3 to 5 times harder to get in the game. Sacreds, I think, are pretty decent. I think where Raid really falls down is not necessarily in the drop rates, but in their pity system. So when you're doing a Void or an Ancient Shard and you have to pull 220 legend or 220 shards to guarantee yourself a legendary character, especially with the number of legendaries in the game, this is just greedy. This is insane. Now that being said, if King Arthur adopted this in their game, it'd probably be a healthy thing for them to do because they have 5 characters in the game. So that being said, you should make it a lot harder to get those characters because there's so few of them. With Raid, I forget how many legendary characters there are in the game, but this is incredibly greedy, and from a player standpoint, especially on the Voids, it just feels like almost hopeless. Like, how often am I actually going to get a new character on my account? Which becomes kind of stagnating and a little boring in its own space. I personally think that the area in the middle is where GodForge wants to be, and I think that they've said different things. I think their drop rates, I think, will be a little closer to what Raid's going in theirs. I think their pity system should be significantly more generous, and I think it will be. And then I also believe they're going to be a little more generous with the actual amount of shards and openings you get in the game. The balance they need to find is that you're not progressing through your account too quickly, but you're also not progressing super slow, where it just feels like you're just being taken advantage of. And I think that is the balance, and there's a lot of room between Raid and King Arthur to find that balance, or at least get closer to it. And so I expect that system to fall in that place. If we move over to King Arthur, I think King Arthur kind of did what I'm talking about, where they came out with a game that they wanted to compete with Raid on day one. And I think the idea is there, the bones are there, the structure of the game is really good. But where they're falling down is everything is achievable super fast. So I'm definitely not an in-game player in King Arthur. If I want to take a brand new character I just pulled, I'm trying to think of somebody. I just put Florentius on my account. I can level him up to level 50 right away. I can advance him by doing not even a day of farming. It'd probably take me, I don't even know, 20 minutes to farm these guys here, as long as I had the stamina to do it. And boom, he's 6-star. Then I can go over to level up. I've got all these potions just sitting on deck. I can level them straight to level 60. From there on the skill ups, I have a lot of things already stacked up, ready to go. I can basically max this character out in a day. Which, I mean, some of these things, they do kind of kick the can down the road with the talismans and the books, which is fair. But I think that this carrot has to be further away. Like, you need to grind this character out a little bit. Like, I mean, I can basically get this character on my account, and as a mid-game player, take him immediately to super advanced. Which I think is an issue. I think as far as like the awakening of your characters, I think is similar to what they got going on with the Ascensions for Raid. But maybe it would have been a benefit to introduce this on the 100-day anniversary. That way you have players that have moved up 6 stars and starting to get a lot of 6-star characters on their accounts, but now they have a new carrot to work on where they're starting to awaken their champions. The skills, I think probably needed to be available on day 1, and then chivalries, potentially you only could do to chivalry level 3. Maybe that's what they do for the first 100 days. And then after that, they moved it to chivalry level 8, and then they move it to 10. Like, over time, where you're gaining more and more stuff for the champions, and it gives you incremental gains that don't feel like they're all at once. Because you put this in the game on day 1, and the whales are going to have chivalry level 10 characters fully awakened in the first week. And so you're like, oh, okay, well, now that they have that going on, what's next? And you don't have anything in the arsenal to bring out. So now those whales are getting bored, and whales are going to go find some place to play, have fun, spend money. Like they're going to find the games that speak to them. And unfortunately, you just lost that whale on your game because you didn't have anything that helps them stay interested and focused in your game. So looking at like equipment, they do not have a awakening version of equipment, which I think is probably coming to the game. But again, I feel like if that was in their arsenal where they could have launched that whenever they needed to, it probably would have come out already, trying to keep some of these in-game players still focused on their game. In the relic setup, they have kind of a lot of the same things going on where you can strengthen the relic, advance the relic, awaken. Again, launching awakening a little later probably would have been a benefit in that space. I think the skill up's probably necessary out of the gate because it really brings credence to the final dungeon there where you get the Master of Apocalypse. Those are the things I believe that because King Arthur started from day one as I believe trying to compete with Raid in its entirety, they kind of shot themselves in the foot because they didn't allow for a healthy progression and game advancement. Instead, it was basically get everybody maxed out super fast, get every character in the game super fast, and then have nothing to do, which is a problem. And I think as for their drop rates, they're on the other end of it, where they have literally, what do we have? 72 characters in the game, and 31 of those are borderline garbage. There's, I think, 1 or 2 uncommon characters that have some very niche uses, with the exception of Jarrett. He's great for Gorgos. But I think that's, not super uncommon. But the struggle here, obviously, the amount of characters in the game is not enough, or even close to it in general. For a hero collection game, you need a lot of heroes. You want to collect the heroes. But the other thing that they're really falling down on, and as a player, you always think you want this. You always think like, oh, I definitely want this. But they are super generous with how many summons you get. Like, I mean, every time I play the game, I could probably pull 10 summons every single day, or very close to it. Like, I am constantly getting summons every single day. Raid up summons are a little scarcer and a little harder to come by, which I think is the right move. But even still, when these raid up banners come every 2 weeks, I've spent $128 on the account to be fully transparent, but I have yet not been able to pull one of the brand new characters because I didn't have 60 of these. So, and I'm not a whale. I mean, $128 over 90 days is not a lot of money, especially when you're trying to figure out like how to bring revenue into the game, to market it, to grow it, to do all the things. They're not looking for people like me spending money. They're looking for the people that can spend thousands of dollars on this game a month. That's where they're really going to grow King Arthur. And unfortunately, there's just not enough content to warrant spending $1,000 a month. But again, you're super generous here with the amount of summons you get, and then you're also super generous here with the pity system. So like with the raid up champion, it used to be 50% chance. So maybe you had to pull 120 or maybe even more because you're basically flipping a coin at 60 whether or not you got the raid up champion or not. They moved that to 100% chance. There was people had a bad taste in their mouth. Now you're guaranteed that champion at 60, which is very generous and very nice. You also have a pity system at 60, not 220. So you're getting a lot more summons. You're getting a lot more legendaries with the pities. And I think they're banking on the fact you need 11 copies of every legendary in the game in order to max out your chivalries. But at a certain point, your legendary characters become entirely usable, and you don't necessarily need those extra chivalries, and so they just become icing on the cake instead of the cake itself. So you get less and less excited to get copies of characters. And then there's specific ones you do. You really want, like Nika, for example. I'd love to have a Chivalry 8 Nika. Well, I'm going to the summon session trying to get going, and I got to pull how many other legendaries before I can get Nika, which is why the raid up summons is awesome. That being said, they're very inconsistent with their drops as far as new champions, so I'm probably not pulling from Nika because I want to make sure I have these available for a new champion when and if they come to the game. So I think that kind of wraps up my thought as far as what's going on with GodForge. I'm super excited about the game, but there's that voice in the back of my head that, like, when you have really high expectations for something, potentially it can fall down. And I was thinking of some of the ways that GodForge potentially could fall down, and I think that these are some legitimate concerns. If you allow for players players to advance too quickly in the game without having a really strong roadmap of new content for them to get to. It's going to stagnate quickly, like you see here with King Arthur. I think there's probably about 100-ish to 120 days of content in the game for a free-to-play player, and maybe upwards of 6 months. And for a whale, there's probably, I don't even know, like maybe 60 days, maybe. 60 days of content in the game, and by then you're maxing everything out and you've pretty much tapped the finish line and there's nothing left to do. So that's kind of a concern. I think that getting incremental successes that you feel every day when you log in, you've made progress, but you still have to work towards bigger goals, such as 6-starring a champion or fully awakening a champion, or some of those bigger milestones in the account. I think is going to be a huge win for the longevity of the game, just because it's going to feel more accomplishing when you get there, as opposed to, okay, that just happened real quick and now I have people that I've 6-starred, I don't even remember I 6-starred them. I don't know that ever happened in Raid. Like in Raid, when I 6-star somebody, it was a intentional thing that I'd been planning on for a few days, if not weeks, and then you had to roll through with gear and everything else to get that player actually ready to go. But I do think that there's some middle ground there somewhere as far as the grindiness of leveling characters and just slowing progress down a little bit, to the point where you have more stuff in your game, then the game can last a little longer. I think obviously the drop rates and generosity of what's going on in King Arthur is what all the players always say they want, and now you're seeing it in action and it doesn't really pan out. The only way this pans out is if the hero pool is 10 times bigger. Like, I mean, really, it needs to be significantly bigger for these drop rates to really make sense. But I mean, at the end of the day, it is fun to come into a game and know I'm gonna get every character in this game eventually. You don't have that with Raid. There's characters in the game you'll never get on your account. It doesn't matter how long you play, which I think is a completely different problem to have. And I'm hoping GodForge has some solutions there where you can actually earn or work towards specific characters if you want to, and you can pick any character in the game and work towards getting that character through some sort of process. But that's about what I got for you today on the GodForge front. I am super excited for this game to come out. We are pushed back on the beta testing. I think they were talking about late June, early July at this point, which tells me that launch is probably getting moved back as well. But the last video we saw was pretty good, and I'm actually recording this prior to Fateless launching a pretty big podcast that's supposed to be launching today, that is going to hopefully answer a lot of questions about the beta testing and progress and where things are. But currently I've been kind of going through the Simon Q&A he put out and just kind of thinking about what's going on with GodForge. So this is just a thought that I had. I thought I'd throw together a video and get your thoughts out there. And then hopefully I'll do a reaction video to the podcast after I watch it when it goes live. So that'll be another GodForge video on the horizon, so stay tuned for that. But I appreciate you hanging out with me all the way to the end. If you haven't liked and subscribed to the channel, please do so. It means the world to me, and I look forward to seeing you next time.